If you are a ready player, meaning you start the chess game with one knight to f3, you need to see this game. Especially if you have faced d5 queen's pawn move, then you fianchetto your bishop with g3 and opponent plays an odd move, knight to d7 in front of the queen, all right? So originally I was only going to show you one game. However, I did recording of the original video 2 days ago and I was not able to do editing the same night. So 2 rounds later, I realized that the same player used same Reti opening in a very interesting game against an opening expert. So I'll be showing you total of 2 games in this video. Next game I want to show you was played by my man Razvan. Raz was one of our other teammates at University of Texas at Dallas. We have spent a lot of time together studying chess, and not only chess, actually we had a history class together during our time at UTD. Okay, so we used to study for that together too. Now he is graduated and back in Canada. Raz actually has been on fire in this tournament, which I am very happy to see. He has 3 wins for his national team so far. Raz, keep going, my man. Starts the game with knight f3. Why do I say an interesting try? Raz is an e4 player. Okay, so in the previous round, I think he won the game in the Sicilian, I believe. So it is pretty wild to see now him switching it up just a round later. Knight f3, and he switches up to what? My favorite Reti. All right, knight f3, d5, g3, knight to d7. This line has becoming more and more popular. Black wants to play e5 and take control of the center, so white has to stop that if they don't want black to get too active in the center. This move was made popular by Kirill Alexeyenko in his game against Sergei Karyakin when he beat him at the Grand Swiss, I think, and Alexeyenko qualified for the candidates tournament, if you guys remember, in 2019, I believe, 2019 for the 2020 candidates. Okay, knight to b6. What is the idea of knight b6? It is a very straightforward idea, actually. White in Catalan positions, most Catalan positions, play c4, right, to put the pressure on this d5 pawn. So knight on b6 simply overprotects the c4 square. As simple as that. b3 played by Razvan very fast, so he must have expected this line, okay, knight d7, knight b6 line, because otherwise I do not think he would be blitzing this move immediately, right? Because there are a lot of moves. What is the most natural try here for white? Probably bishop to g2. That is what I have played myself. Actually, I also played this with black color against Lazaro Bruzon, the legend of now American, but I think originally he's Cuban chess. So b3, a very interesting immediate move order here. Bishop to f5, knight bd2. White's plan is very straightforward. He wants to go c4, e6, and knight to h4. Well, if black did not play h6 and they're willing to give up this bishop, white will try to take that bishop. Okay, black says, no, I can't give you that bishop. That is kind of what I did against Bruzon, actually. I just moved the bishop back on g6, and then something like this happened, not immediately, but basically I managed to defend this position, this type of pawn structure, right? Almost like Caro-Kann without the bishop, basically. Light square bishop. All right. Black decides not to give up that bishop. Bishop g4, h3. Bishop is kicked back on h5. And a very creative attempt here, which I like a lot and hope to use it at some point. I play these positions a lot. I get actually this knight d7, knight b6 quite a bit. I think I have probably about 5 games total, if I consider like rapid and classical time controls. So knight to g2. going after this bishop no matter what. G4 was not possible because the H4 knight was hanging. So if bishop G2, then position gets a little awkward here. For example, bishop to B2, bishop B4, bishop B2. Black can have many ideas here, like F5, for example, is live by computer. Simply C6, and white will have to untangle his position here. Bring this knight back, short castle, and then go C4 and hope to make E4 work at some point in this life. But with knight F6 and then bishop retreating back to G6, I think that is going to be quite challenging. So I like this move knight G2 a lot, threatening now to go on F4 and win that bishop on H4. Black tacks that bishop back on F7 with F6, and seemingly this could be nice if black gets E5 and, for example, like C5 going, but now this knight is going to be repurposed to a very nice and comfortable square. Bishop goes to B2, bishop to D6, hitting this knight and trying to double the pawns. Knight goes to D3. What a square for a knight. You don't see this type of maneuver a lot. Okay, I play these positions a lot, and I can tell you, this is a very rare maneuver. Okay, very rare idea, and Raz plays it with only 3 minutes spent on the clock. Very nice prep, my man. I'll be following your footsteps, right, in these positions. Black plays C6, and now white is ready to go for E4. Take control of the center. White pieces suddenly start to flow. Bishop G2, short castle, C4. That is the plan, which black can do very little about. Knight D7, C4, and suddenly all white pieces are great here. Both knights are great. White's center is dominant here, so white's having a lot of fun. Let's put it that way. Rook goes to C8, rook to E1. Let's see how Raz converts this big positional advantage into something tangible. Knight takes C4, bishop moves away, bishop goes to A3, putting the pressure on this diagonal, right? The long diagonal, and then knight. Rook goes to E8, knight lands on C5. Little inaccuracy, but that is, well, I would say not really an inaccuracy here. Computer says that there will be other moves here, like H4 would be better, or simply like Rook C1. But all right, he wants to clear the waters here. Black does not trade there, knight C5. I'm assuming that they probably didn't like D takes C5 and then knight landing on D6. Okay, black plays queen to C7, and here comes the first brilliancy of the game. Knight takes E6. What is the point of sacrificing the knight? Well, when you capture it back, D5 now comes with a lot of power. Attacking the bishop, threatening to play D6, and forking his queen and the knight on E7. Black simply decides to leave that bishop as it is on E6 and move the knight away. D takes E6. Now white is up a pawn. Rook goes C to D8, queen H5, trying to get on F7 square. Black says, I cannot allow that. Well, E7, move your knight back. What is the point? Why would I want to force that knight back? Because then knight comes with the tempo. You cannot capture because it is simply a mate immediately on E8. Rook goes to F8, rook A to D1, defending the knight on D6, bringing the last remaining piece into the game, and white is dominating. Knight goes to G6. Now, little bit of poking around. Let's see where we can invade from. Right now, queen E6 is a threat, so queen E7 has to be played. Well, if that is the case, I can retreat my knight back, force you to play C5, and weaken your position a little more. Now knight will retreat back to E3, reroute it towards F5, or if you move the knight away, it's going to go to D5. Knight goes to E5, attacking the queen. Knight F5, very important tempo. You take there, we take with a check. You go up to go for this knight. will gladly take on g4, and once you capture back, bishop c5 would win the material here. Already a pawn up, go bishop d6, I believe, rook takes d6, rook takes e5. This is a game over, right? Rook takes e5. Black is going to lose a lot of material. So after knight f5, black moves the queen away to c7. White also moves the queen back to e2. Knight c8, f4, using every single piece in the game. Okay, well, not really, but keep adding more and more pieces. If you can use the pawns here, why not? Kick this knight away from the active square. Now, knight will have to retreat back after this rook trade on the d file. That is gonna free the g4 square for the queen. So queen returns back, knight f to d6 to defend the checkmate on g7. Knight takes d6, knight takes d6, queen to e6 check. King slides in the corner, e5. White now forced to open up the files. F takes e5, queen takes e5. This bishop temporarily has been cut off the game, but that cannot last too long. Now c5 pawn is hanging, and after b6, that bishop is gonna come back to b2, where it will be putting excruciating pressure along the long diagonal. Rook goes to e8, queen now x-rays the king from h5, queen goes to e7, and bishop lands on a very dominant square here on e5. What is the point of bishop e5? Well, rook goes to f8, and final touch, a very classy one here, I gotta say, rook takes d6, finishing the game with another brilliancy. Bravo, Raz. If bishop takes d6, bishop goes to e4, threatening the checkmate and pretty much deciding the game, because there is no h6 that would lead to checkmate after queen h6, that king is pinned. So there, bishop d5 or bishop h7, queen g6, checkmate. Whew! Round 5 of Chess Olympiad 2024, match between Canada and Greece. A very interesting encounter with white colors. We have Grandmaster Razvan Preotu against Ioannis Papaioannou. Also Grandmaster, who's been 2650 before and is considered a very good opening expert. Raz starts game with knight f3, black responds with d5, g3, white fianchettos bishop on the long diagonal. Black plays c6 to build up this pawn block against the light square bishop. Bishop goes to g2, bishop to g4. Another very standard way of countering Reti opening from the black side. White castles short. I used to joke with my friends that the reason I like to play Reti is because I can pre-move first 4 moves, and what I have in mind is knight f3, g3, bishop g2, short castle. These are usually standard starting moves for white. Knight goes to d7. Now black wants to play e5 if white allows to on the next move. White plays h3 to kick the bishop away, and then Raz decides to go d4, not allow e5. That is a little different. Original King's Indian attack here would be d3 and then probably going for e4, but d4 also makes a lot of sense. I think it's a little more ambitious, balancing the center. Black plays e6, pawn to c4, attacking the center, and black continues with bishop to d6. Capturing on c4 is not to be feared at the moment, because there are probably other ways here. Queen c2, one of them I think to try get the pawns back, or compensation here, b3. If you do take, then queen takes c6. I think this is in white's favor. Black plays bishop to d6, queen to b3, putting the pressure on the b7 pawn. Rook to b8. I would expect that black definitely saw queen b6 here. Maybe they did not want to go to this queen trade position after b4. I'm not sure actually why not queen b6 here immediately, but Black decided to play rook b8, which also makes a lot of sense to defend the b7 pawn with. Maybe actually after queen b6, white would have tried something like knight c3 first, not immediately pushing c5. And if knight gf6, probably then c5, because now the difference is after these captures, when black retreats the bishop, white manages to get a really good pawn structure, b5 push to be precise, and black is not able to stop it. If a6, b5 is still a possibility, captures, and rook on a8 is hanging, so the pawn on a6 is pinned, is not able to capture on b5, which results in a better pawn structure for white. White has one pawn island, means that all their pawns are connected here. Black has two pawn islands. Their b and d pawns are disconnected. So rook to b8, white plays knight c3, black responds it with knight to f6, and now what? Now there are few ideas here. Main idea, I would say, what is probably most standard is preparing e4 somehow, maybe rook e1 and then e4, rook e1, knight h4, then e4. However, those positions lead to maybe slight advantage for white due to space, but black's position is very solid, and especially now with the light squared bishop outside of pawn chain, we are used to having the bishop on c8 mainly in mainline Catalan positions. So now with bishop on h5, I think black does not have too many issues with that position if white was to play e4. So Raz decides here to capture on d5, e takes d5, and go knight to h4. Computer does say this is a slight inaccuracy, but it's a very common idea to play knight h4, trying getting the dark square bishop, also rerouting knight towards f5 here. Black plays short castle and white goes f4. Now idea of f4 is to play g4 and basically trap the bishop on h5. However, things are not going to be so easy here. Apparently black would have been getting better position now with bishop g6, and I think the point of that move is that then this bishop is gonna come to e4 if it is allowed to on the next move, and white cannot play f5 because then g3 pawn is hanging while attacking the knight on h4. So let's say f takes g4, bishop takes h4, and black won a pawn, and plus now white's pawn structure is really bad. I should have probably mentioned also that this is a very concrete measure for white. If black is able to settle the issues with this bishop on h5, then white pawn structure is really awkward here. e2 pawn especially is the backwards pawn, and having a backwards pawn on an open file here is going to be a weakness. So there is a cons also on playing f4 move, and black is not able to take advantage of that. So bishop g6 would be a correct move here, forcing white to capture on g6 and then probably go e4 here, but I do feel that black has no weakness, and white does have few weaknesses here. King is little loose, d4 is an isolated pawn, so not 100% sure how to evaluate this. Computer likes black slightly. So knight to e4 was played in the game instead of going bishop g6. Now this is straight up a mistake, as we can see, and pretty substantial one now, because apparently white had a way to get almost a winning advantage immediately. Now when knight trade is offered, a lot of times and a lot of players assume that taking with the knight for a knight would make the most sense, and overlook that a move like bishop takes e4 here would be almost winning. Point being that after d takes e4, white simply goes knight back to g2, so preparing g4 move, and black bishop is not able to run away to this f7 square. In fact, this f7 square pawn is not able to move at all because queen is pinning the king. So now the bishop is going to be in trouble if king moves, which is supposed to be best move here. Now g4, and apparently black would have to give up the bishop. The main continuation that computer is suggesting here is sacrifice the piece and then go rook f6, maybe rook h6, queen e8 for some counterplay, but white should be able to use this extra piece, bring the queen, then the knight probably will still be related to some technical issues, but piece is a piece. All right, so bishop e4, knight to g2, that would be actually really nice. I don't think there is the way. For example, knight f6, g4, still trapping this, and again, black would have to go 2 pawns, not even 2 pawns actually, since we win the e4 pawn back, and then queen g3. So basically, bishop e4 would be winning a piece. So Razvan unfortunately didn't see that, took there with the knight. Now d takes e4. White will still have an advantage because of this knight f5 move, attacking the d6 bishop with that tempo. And once it retreats back, then white plays g4. That was necessary because queen was attacking the knight on h4 on the previous move. So g4 would not be a possibility. So that is why knight f7, when bishop moves back, then g4, now bishop goes to g6, and this knight now retreats back to g3. Now that is not to say that, well, it is actually, queen is defending the g3 knight, so f5 immediately is a threat. Black plays queen h4, putting the pressure on this knight on g3, and apparently another inaccuracy from white here, knight takes e4, and Razvan played this very quick too. He actually does like to rush in things from time to time. Now, if he had taken more time here, probably would understand that this bishop is in a very difficult situation. So it is enough for white to secure this knight somehow on g3, and then f5 will be very dangerous. Computer likes this move knight to h1, renewing the threat of f5, but okay, that I think is a ridiculous move. More doable is bishop to d2, but okay, then h5 would still be a possibility here. So it is apparently not that clear. Oh, or it is, because h5 loses to g5, and now this queen on h4 might end up in trouble. For example, if you go rook f8, then bishop e1, threatening to move the knight on the next move and trapping the queen. So bishop d2 would be very strong. I'm not even sure, maybe king h8 to try to play f5, but then bishop b4, hitting this rook, and when you move the rook, then going bishop back to e1. That is very crafty from white. Okay, now knight discovered this f5 is still a threat, defending this knight, so white will win some material on the next move. What happened in the game was more natural. White just captured the pawn on e4. Now black gets rid of that bishop, problematic bishop on g6. Bishop takes e4, and white did win a pawn, but is it going to be enough for a winning advantage? Now, previous move, to give you context, white was probably about +2 computer evaluation. Now it is back to 0.5. So white's advantage actually reduced by a lot because the king side is a little loose, pawn structure is a little loose, and black doesn't really have a weakness. And that is all for the cost of just one pawn. Queen comes to f3, bishop to b6. We'll see here another inaccuracy, apparently e3 defending the center. And after black tries to take down the center with c5, obviously white says, why would I do that? I will keep my pawn center, no thank you. Pawn goes to c4, black insists on keeping this bishop active on the diagonal. Bishop retreats back to c2. Now white's idea is to play king g2 and then get these pawns moving. If that is the case, game will be decided very quick. So black has to do something about it. Knight goes to c5, king goes to g2, and brings knight onto white's position. Well, white says, I'm happy to trade that bishop for your knight. Knight is a pesky piece, and go bishop d2 to finish the development. Black brings the rook into the game with rook c8, rook a to c1. Rooks are being traded, and now queen retreats back to f6. Bishop defends the b2 pawn while attacking the queen with the tempo. Queen goes to g6, and probably I would think that this is what computer considers to be a critical mistake. White had a very powerful move here. They could go e4 immediately. Point being that if rook captures e4, there is f5 move winning the rook. Okay, disconnecting here the coordination between queen and the rook. if rook was to go e2 check, queen takes e2 and then captures on g6, winning a rook. Now, if queen takes e4, there is rook e1 move, attacking now queen and the rook. If queen takes f3, king takes f3, and apparently this endgame is winning for white, because if rook takes e1, bishop takes e1, and white is way closer to this pawn, so basically then we'll go around and take this d3 pawn and play bishop endgame with an extra pawn. If rook was to move away to d8, now white can get really active here. Really power move, I think, is rook e7, activating the rook on the 7th rank, then threatening to go king e4. For example, if you go g6, king e4, and this d3 pawn is going to be taken on the next move. Now rook is active, b7 is weak, so white has a winning endgame. +2 with the computer's evaluation. Now, what ends up happening instead in the game here is rook to e1, black plays f5, and then another inaccuracy with queen g3. Probably this is actually the critical inaccuracy. White could have still maintained the big advantage here with something like bishop to d2, but now pawn structure is a little loose. e4 is not going to be as easy to carry, so after rook c8, it would still be quite challenging to convert this, I think. I'm not sure. King g3, apparently that's what computer is suggesting, rook c4, and then go rook d1. There has to be a lot of maneuvering here still made in order to clear things, because king is loose. It's not going to be so easy to win the d3 pawn. Now, what ends up happening is queen g3. I'm not sure actually what the idea of queen g3 was. Why would Raz go for that? I guess to get away from the x-ray on the g file. Now, well, also threaten to take gf5 actually. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Now gf5 is a threat, in fact, and then g7 would be hanging, right, with the checkmate, trying to trade queens. Black says, no, I cannot trade queens, I'm down a pawn. Now attacks the d5 pawn, king moves on the side, and apparently after trades here on g4, we are back to equality. Now, I'm not sure if Raz missed this or he thought that this would be really good for his position here to push e4 even at the cost of a pawn. Now, if taking on g4, then e3 is hanging. So no matter what, black manages to get that pawn deficit back. White plays e4. Now, these pawns do look good, but bishop to c7, putting the pressure on the f4 pawn. Now, if e5, then queen takes d5. So white doesn't want to drop the d pawn. Instead, defends the f4 pawn back with the bishop. G takes h3, and here, very interesting occurrence, in my opinion, and not sure what Raz was exactly thinking, but king starts marching. Black attacks the f4 pawn, and as they say, inaccuracies and mistakes rarely come in singles, but I can barely even call this a mistake, although computer says so. I think king to g4, defending the f4 pawn. I think white deserves here courage points. I think white definitely deserves courage points here, but not sure if objectively that is a good move. Suddenly king comes to g4 to simply protect the pawn on f4. Now why not play rook f1 to defend that pawn? Well, there will be queen h5 check, and then queen e2 check, suddenly attacking bishop, attacking the e4, and this is almost like checkers. Like queen did the checker kind of move there, check check, and captures few pawns. So king g4 at least does not allow that, defends the pawn on f4, and now white actually probably, if queen moves away, they want to push this pawn. If h5, then king retreats back to f3 in a very safe square. Best move here for black would apparently be h6, which is a very obscure idea, preparing g5. So brutal. Now, black player Ioannis Papaioannou does not notice that, which is very hard to blame for here. queen to f6 looks like a natural move. Now white defends with rook f1 here. Rook goes to e8 and queen d3. Look at that king simply chilling on g4. Queen to g6 check, then king returns back to safety with f3. Now h5, threatening probably queen g4. d6. Bishop goes to b6. Why not capture on d6? There will be queen d5 check. And if king moves away now, let's say h7, then rook g1. What a catch by Raz. Here, queen takes g1, queen takes h5, and then takes on e8 with a check. And next move will also be white's, and white also wins this bishop on d6. What a sequence here. So black doesn't capture on d6, moves the bishop away instead to b6, queen d5 check, rook to e6. Now e5. Eventually white would have to defend this pawn on d6, and plus there was a checkmate threat on g4. Actually with bishop b6 here, if f5, there's checkmate on g4. Never too late to blunder, right? As I like to say. e5, queen to g4 check, and what a finish of a very exciting game. King to e4 here. Now if queen goes to g2, there is rook f3, and now suddenly white is winning again due to this pin. If check on e2, king goes to f5, winning the rook on e6, and king is actually very safe into black's position there. So black is forced to force a draw. All right, king g5 there, and back and forth on e2 f5 is gonna result in a draw. What a game. I think a lot of fun from both sides. I could definitely tell that Raz was probably quite happy with this king march. Probably not so happy with the result after he realizes that earlier on he had a winning position. Anyways, I hope these two games illustrate how creative can Reti Opening get. Now it can transpose to a lot of different positions, and that is why this opening is attraction to so many strong players, including myself. You see what I did there? All right, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.